The Mysterious Map, A Race Against Time and Greed. Chapter 1. The Unexpected Inheritance. The Hartley family had always been an ordinary bunch. Sarah, a 38-year-old librarian, her husband Mark, a high school history teacher, and their two children, 15-year-old Emily and 12-year-old Jack, lived a quiet life in the suburbs of Boston. Their days were filled with work, school, and the occasional family outing to the nearby parks or museums. Little did they know that their lives were about to take an extraordinary turn. It all began on a crisp autumn morning when Sarah received an unexpected phone call from a law firm in London. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to a Mr. Reginald Blackwood, a solicitor who spoke with a refined British accent. "Mrs. Hartley," he began, "I hope this call doesn't come as too much of a shock, but I'm reaching out regarding the estate of your great-uncle, Cornelius Hartley." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sorry, but I don't believe I have a great-uncle by that name." Mr. Blackwood chuckled softly. "Ah yes, I suspected as much." Cornelius was quite the enigma, even to his own family. He was your grandfather's brother, but he left England at a young age to pursue a life of adventure and exploration. It seems he never quite got around to keeping in touch with his relatives. Sarah listened intently as Mr. Blackwood explained that Cornelius had recently passed away at the age of 94, leaving behind a substantial estate. To Sarah's astonishment, she learned that she and her family were the sole beneficiaries. "But why us?" Sarah asked, still trying to process the information. "It appears that you are the last remaining members of the Hartley bloodline," Mr. Blackwood replied. Cornelius was quite adamant about keeping his legacy within the family. As the conversation continued, Sarah learned that the inheritance included a sizable sum of money, a collection of rare artifacts, and most intriguingly, a trove of maps and journals detailing Cornelius's many expeditions around the world. "Mrs. Hartley, I must stress the importance of discretion in this matter," Mr. Blackwood said, his tone becoming more serious. "Your great-uncle's explorations were not always, shall we say, officially sanctioned. There may be parties interested in acquiring his findings through less than legal means." Sarah's heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation. She agreed to Mr. Blackwood's suggestion of flying to London as soon as possible to settle the estate and claim the inheritance. That evening, as the Hartley family sat around the dinner table, Sarah shared the news of their unexpected windfall. Mark's eyes widened with excitement, his mind already racing with the historical implications of Cornelius's discoveries. Emily and Jack exchanged looks of disbelief and growing enthusiasm. "So we're going to London?" Jack asked, barely able to contain his excitement. Sarah nodded, a mix of anticipation and apprehension in her voice. "We leave in 2 days. Mr. Blackwood has arranged for us to stay at Cornelius's townhouse in Kensington." As the family began to make preparations for their journey, none of them could have imagined the adventure that awaited them across the Atlantic. The mysterious maps of Cornelius Hartley were about to lead them on a quest that would challenge their wits, test their courage, and ultimately change their lives forever. Chapter 2. Arrival in London. The Hartley family stepped off the plane at Heathrow Airport, their bodies weary from the long flight but their minds buzzing with excitement. As they made their way through customs, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced around nervously, but saw nothing out of the ordinary in the bustling terminal. A sleek black car was waiting for them outside, the driver holding a sign with Hartley written in bold letters. As they approached, the driver, a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard, introduced himself as James. "Mr. Blackwood sent me to escort you to the townhouse," he explained, helping them with their luggage. "He thought it best to avoid public transportation, given the sensitive nature of your visit." The family piled into the car, and as they drove through the streets of London, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at the mix of old and new architecture that defined the city. Emily and Jack pressed their faces against the windows, pointing out famous landmarks they recognized from their history books. As they turned onto a quiet street lined with elegant Victorian houses, James announced, "We've arrived at Cornelius's residence." The townhouse was a stunning 4-story building with a black wrought iron fence and a small, meticulously maintained garden. James used a key to open the front door, revealing an interior that seemed frozen in time. The entryway was adorned with artifacts from around the world, African masks, Incan pottery, and delicate Chinese porcelain. The walls were covered in faded maps and black and white photographs of a dashing young man in various exotic locations. "That must be Cornelius," Mark said, examining one of the photos closely. "He looks like he could have stepped right out of an Indiana Jones movie." As the family explored the house, they discovered room after room filled with books, artifacts, and curios from Cornelius's travels. In the study, they found a large mahogany desk covered in papers and leather-bound journals. "This is incredible," Sarah breathed, running her fingers along the spines of the journals. "It's like stepping into a time capsule." Just then the doorbell rang, startling them all. James went to answer it, returning moments later with Mr. Blackwood in tow. "Ah, the Hartley family," Mr. Blackwood said warmly, shaking hands with each of them. "I trust your journey was pleasant? I apologize for not meeting you at the airport, but I thought it best to let you settle in first." As they gathered in the living room, Mr. Blackwood began to explain the details of Cornelius's estate. "Your great-uncle was a remarkable man," he said, his eyes twinkling. "He spent his entire life searching for lost treasures and forgotten civilizations. Many of his discoveries were donated to museums around the world, but he kept his most prized possessions here." Mr. Blackwood reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. "This contains all the legal documents pertaining to your inheritance. The house, its contents, and a substantial sum of money are now yours. However, there is one more item that Cornelius wanted you to have personally." He produced a small wooden box, intricately carved with symbols from various ancient cultures. Cornelius left specific instructions that this box was to be opened only by his heirs in private. Sarah took the box, feeling its weight in her hands. "What's inside?" she asked. Mr. Blackwood shook his head. "I'm afraid I don't know. Cornelius was very secretive about it. He only said that it contained the key to his greatest discovery." As Mr. Blackwood prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "One more thing," he said, his voice lowered. "Be careful. Cornelius had many rivals in the treasure-hunting world, and some of them were not above using unsavory methods to get what they wanted. If you need anything, don't hesitate to call me." With that ominous warning, Mr. Blackwood departed, leaving the Hartley family alone in the townhouse with their thoughts and the mysterious wooden box. "Well," Mark said, breaking the silence, "shall we see what's inside?" The family gathered around as Sarah carefully opened the box. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was an old parchment map, yellowed with age and covered in intricate drawings and notations. "It's beautiful," Emily whispered, leaning in for a closer look. As Sarah unfolded the map, a small note fluttered to the floor. Jack picked it up and read it aloud. "To my dear family. If you are reading this, then my long journey has come to an end. But yours is just beginning. This map holds the secret to a treasure beyond imagination, one that could change the course of history. Trust no one but each other, and remember, the greatest adventures are those we share with the ones we love. Your affectionate uncle, Cornelius Hartley." The family looked at each other, a mix of excitement and trepidation on their faces. Little did they know that at that very moment, across the city, a group of ruthless treasure hunters were already plotting to get their hands on Cornelius Hartley's final secret. Chapter 3: Decoding the Map. The Hartley family spent the next few days poring over the mysterious map in Cornelius's journals, trying to make sense of the cryptic symbols and notations. The map itself was a work of art, depicting a stylized version of the Mediterranean region, with intricate illustrations of mythical creatures and ancient landmarks scattered across its surface. Mark's background in history proved invaluable as he recognized references to various ancient civilizations. "Look here," he said, pointing to a series of symbols near the coast of Greece. "These match descriptions of the lost city of Atlantis from Plato's dialogues." Sarah, drawing on her librarian skills, methodically cataloged and cross-referenced the symbols with entries in Cornelius's journals. Emily, with her keen eye for detail, noticed patterns in the map's design that the others had missed. Even young Jack contributed, his knowledge of video games and puzzles helping to decipher some of the more obscure clues. As they worked, the family began to piece together the story of Cornelius's final quest. It seemed that he had spent decades searching for evidence of a pre-Hellenic civilization that predated even the Minoans. This advanced society, according to Cornelius's theories, possessed knowledge and technology far beyond their time, including a powerful energy source that could revolutionize the modern world. If this is true, Sarah mused, it's no wonder Cornelius wanted to keep it secret. Can you imagine what would happen if this technology fell into the wrong hands? Their research was interrupted by a knock at the door. James, who had been acting as their driver and guide, entered the study with a concerned look on his face. "I don't mean to alarm you," he said in a low voice, "but I've noticed a car parked across the street for the past 2 days. The occupants seem to be watching the house." The family exchanged worried glances. Mark moved to the window and discreetly peeked through the curtains. Sure enough, a nondescript sedan was parked on the opposite side of the street, its windows tinted. "What should we do?" Emily asked, her voice trembling slightly. Sarah thought for a moment, then turned to James. "Is there a back way out of the house?" James nodded. "There's a service entrance that leads to a small alley. I can bring the car around and we can leave without being seen." "Good," Sarah said decisively. "Pack what you need, everyone. We're going on a little trip." As the family hurriedly gathered their belongings and research materials, Sarah called Mr. Blackwood to inform him of the situation. The solicitor sounded grave but not surprised. "I was afraid something like this might happen," he said. "I have a contact in Greece who might be able to help you. His name is Dr. Alexis Papadopoulos, a respected archaeologist at the University of Athens. I'll let him know you're coming." Within an hour, the Hartleys were on their way to Heathrow Airport, the precious map and journals safely tucked away in their luggage. As they boarded a flight to Athens, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and exhilaration. They were no longer just a normal suburban family. They were treasure hunters on a quest to uncover one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Little did they know that their departure had not gone unnoticed. In a sleek office high above London's financial district, a man in an expensive suit put down his phone and turned to his associates. "The Hartleys are on the move," he said, his voice cold and calculating. "Inform our team in Greece. We must obtain that map at any cost." As their plane soared over Europe, the Hartley family was blissfully unaware of the dangers that awaited them in the land of myths and legends. Their adventure was about to take a perilous turn, testing their courage, wit, and the strength of their family bond in ways they could never have imagined. Chapter 4. Athens and Ancient Secrets. The Hartley family arrived in Athens late in the evening, the Acropolis looming majestically over the city, illuminated against the night sky. Despite their exhaustion from the journey, they couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the history surrounding them. They checked into a small family-run hotel in the Plaka district, chosen for its inconspicuous nature rather than luxury. Sarah had insisted on using cash and booking under an assumed name, her paranoia growing with each passing hour. The next morning, they made their way to the University of Athens to meet Dr. Papadopoulos. The archaeologist's office was a cluttered space, filled with books, artifacts, and maps covering every available surface. Dr. Papadopoulos himself was a short, energetic man in his 60s, with wild gray hair and thick-rimmed glasses. He greeted the family warmly, his eyes lighting up with excitement when Sarah mentioned Cornelius's name. "Ah, Cornelius Hartley," he exclaimed. "A brilliant mind, if somewhat unorthodox in his methods. We corresponded for years about his theories on pre-Hellenic civilizations. Most of my colleagues dismissed him as a crackpot, but I always believed there was some truth to his ideas." As Sarah produced the map, Dr. Papadopoulos's eyes widened. He examined it carefully, muttering to himself in Greek. "Extraordinary," he said finally, looking up at the family. "This map combines elements from various ancient cultures, Greek, Egyptian, Phoenician, but there are symbols here I've never seen before. It's as if it's depicting a civilization that existed alongside these known cultures, but remained hidden from history." The archaeologist spent the next few hours helping the family decipher more of the map's secrets. He pointed out that many of the locations marked corresponded to actual archaeological sites, some of which had only been discovered in recent years. Cornelius must have used modern satellite imagery and geological surveys to corroborate his theories. Dr. Papadopoulos mused. But this area here, he said, pointing to a section of the map near Crete, this doesn't match any known landmass or underwater formation. As they pored over the map, Emily noticed something strange. Look, she said, pointing to a series of tiny dots arranged in a spiral pattern. These dots are slightly raised. I can feel them. Dr. Papadopoulos carefully examined the area Emily had pointed out. Fascinating, he said. It appears to be some kind of code embedded in the map itself. But what could it mean? Just then there was a commotion in the hallway outside. The door burst open and two men in dark suits entered, their hands reaching inside their jackets in a menacing manner. Nobody move, one of them growled in heavily accented English. Hand over the map, and no one gets hurt. Dr. Papadopoulos, showing surprising agility for his age, quickly grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and sprayed the intruders, creating a thick white cloud. Run! He shouted to the Hartleys. Take the back stairs. In the chaos that ensued, the family managed to escape, the precious map clutched tightly in Sarah's hands. They ran through the winding streets of Athens, their hearts pounding, unsure if they were still being pursued. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they found themselves in a small, secluded courtyard, gasping for breath. Is everyone okay? Sarah asked, looking around at her family with concern. They nodded, still too out of breath to speak. Mark pulled out his phone to call the police, but Sarah stopped him. We can't involve the authorities, she said. We don't know who we can trust. Those men could have connections everywhere. So what do we do now? Jack asked, his voice shaky. Sarah looked down at the map in her hands, her mind racing. We follow the map, she said firmly. It's the only way to stay ahead of whoever is after us. We need to find this hidden civilization before they do. As the family huddled together in the courtyard, planning their next move, they realized that their lives had irrevocably changed. They were no longer tourists or casual adventurers. They were now guardians of a secret that could change the course of history, hunted by forces they didn't understand. With renewed determination, they set out to unravel the mysteries of the map, knowing that each step would take them closer to danger and to a discovery beyond their wildest dreams. Chapter 5. The Island of Secrets. With the realization that they were now being actively pursued, the Hartley family knew they had to act quickly. Using the cash they had on hand, they purchased basic supplies and booked passage on a small ferry heading to Crete. Their plan was to follow the map's clues to the mysterious area Dr. Papadopoulos had identified near the island. As they sailed across the Aegean Sea, the family huddled in a quiet corner of the deck, studying the map intently. Emily's discovery of the raised dots had opened up a new avenue of investigation. I think I've got it, Mark said excitedly, after hours of careful examination. The dots form a constellation pattern. If we overlay it on the map, it points to a specific location just off the coast of Crete. Sarah nodded, her eyes gleaming with excitement. That must be where Cornelius believed the hidden civilization was located. But how do we get there? It's not like we can just rent a boat and go exploring underwater ruins. As if in answer to her question, Jack pulled out his tablet, which he had been using to research the area. Look at this, he said, showing them a local news article. There's a marine archaeology expedition leaving from Heraklion tomorrow. They're exploring some newly discovered underwater structures. The family exchanged looks of amazement. Could this be mere coincidence, or had Cornelius somehow arranged for this expedition to take place? Upon arriving in Heraklion, the capital of Crete, the Hartleys made their way to the harbor where the expedition was preparing to depart. Sarah approached the lead archaeologist, Dr. Elena Mavros, with a story about being amateur historians interested in the expedition. To their surprise and relief, Dr. Mavros was welcoming and enthusiastic about their interest. We can always use more hands on deck, she said with a smile, especially those with a passion for history. As they boarded the research vessel, the family couldn't believe their luck. However, their relief was short-lived. As they were settling into their quarters, Mark noticed a familiar face among the crew, one of the men who had attacked them in Athens. We've got company, he whispered to Sarah, discreetly pointing out the man. Sarah's heart raced. They were trapped on a boat with at least one enemy, heading towards a potentially world-changing discovery. She gathered the family in their small cabin. "We need to be extremely careful," she said in a low voice. "Don't let the map out of your sight, and don't trust anyone. We'll take turns keeping watch at night." As the expedition got underway, the Hartleys tried to blend in, helping with various tasks on the ship while keeping a wary eye on their surroundings. Emily and Jack's enthusiasm for marine biology came in handy, as they assisted the scientists with cataloging specimens and data entry. On the third day of the expedition, the ship's sonar detected an unusual formation on the seafloor. As the excitement on board grew, Sarah noticed the man from Athens having an intense conversation with another crew member, both of them glancing furtively in the Hartleys' direction. That night, as the ship anchored near the discovery site, the family gathered on the deck, ostensibly to stargaze but really to discuss their next move. "We need to get to those ruins before they do," Mark said, nodding towards the suspicious crew members. "But how?" Emily asked. "We can't exactly sneak out with the diving equipment." Sarah thought for a moment then smiled. "Maybe we don't have to." "Jack, how are your computer skills?" Jack grinned, catching on to his mother's plan. "I think I can handle it." The next morning, as the expedition team prepared to dive, a series of mysterious equipment malfunctions delayed the launch. As the crew scrambled to fix the issues, the Hartleys saw their opportunity. Under the guise of helping with repairs, they managed to secure diving gear for themselves. When a moment presented itself, they slipped over the side of the ship and into the crystal-clear waters of the Mediterranean. As they descended into the depths, following the coordinates from their map, the family was awestruck by the sight that greeted them. Rising from the seafloor were the unmistakable outlines of buildings, streets, and what appeared to be a massive central structure, all perfectly preserved under layers of sediment. But they weren't alone. As they approached the ruins, they saw other divers emerging from the murky distance. The men from Athens had followed them. A desperate underwater chase ensued, with the Hartleys using their knowledge of the map to navigate the ancient city while their pursuers closed in. Just as it seemed they would be caught, Sarah noticed a symbol on a wall that matched one from the map. Acting on instinct, she pressed it, causing a hidden door to slide open. The family quickly swam inside, the door closing behind them just as their pursuers reached it. They found themselves in an air-filled chamber, gasping as they removed their masks. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they realized they were standing in some kind of control room, filled with technology that looked both ancient and futuristic at the same time. "I can't believe it," Mark whispered in awe. Cornelius was right. This civilization, it was far more advanced than we ever imagined. Before they could explore further, they heard a muffled explosion from outside. Their pursuers were attempting to blast their way in. "Quick," Sarah said, examining the strange controls. "We need to find a way to protect this place." As the family worked frantically to decipher the alien technology, they knew that the fate of this incredible discovery, and perhaps the future of human knowledge, rested in their hands. The race against time had reached its most critical moment. Chapter 6. The Heart of Atlantis. As the muffled sounds of their pursuers' attempts to breach the chamber grew louder, the Hartley family worked feverishly to understand the ancient technology surrounding them. The control room was a marvel of engineering, with crystalline structures pulsing with an otherworldly blue light and holographic displays flickering to life as they moved about the space. "This is incredible," Mark breathed, his historian's mind racing to contextualize what he was seeing. "This technology, it's thousands of years ahead of anything from the known ancient world." Sarah, meanwhile, had found what appeared to be a central console. As she ran her hands over its smooth surface, symbols similar to those on the map began to glow. "Emily," she called, "can you make sense of these? They look like the ones you deciphered earlier." Emily hurried over, her eyes widening as she recognized the patterns. "It's the same language system," she confirmed, "but it's so much more complex. It's like they're instructions for something." As Emily worked to translate the symbols, Jack had discovered a series of crystalline rods that seemed to fit into slots on the console. "It's like a key," he said excitedly. "Maybe if we arrange them in the right order, we can activate the system." The family worked together, combining Emily's translations, Jack's intuition for puzzles, and Mark and Sarah's analytical skills. As they rearranged the crystal rods based on their deductions, the chamber began to hum with energy. Suddenly, a massive holographic display sprang to life in the center of the room, showing a three-dimensional map of the Earth. But it was an Earth they barely recognized. The continents were arranged differently, and at the center of the Atlantic Ocean was a large island that doesn't exist on any modern map. Atlantis, Mark whispered in awe. It's real. It was real. The hologram zoomed in on the island, revealing a highly advanced city with technology that seemed to blend seamlessly with nature. As they watched, fascinated, a voice began to speak in an ancient language that somehow miraculously they could understand. "Greetings, seekers of knowledge," the voice said. "If you are hearing this message, then the failsafes we put in place have endured the ages. We are the Atlanteans, and this is the story of our civilization's rise and fall." The hologram shifted, showing scenes of a society far more advanced than any known ancient culture. The voice explained how the Atlanteans had harnessed a powerful energy source from the Earth itself, using it to create technology that could control the weather, heal any disease, and even manipulate the fabric of space-time. "But our hubris was our downfall," the voice continued, a note of sadness evident. "In our quest for ever greater power, we tapped too deeply into the Earth's core. The resulting cataclysm sank our island and nearly destroyed the world. We used the last of our power to save what we could, hiding our remaining cities beneath the waves and scattering our knowledge across the globe in hopes that one day, when humanity was ready, it would be rediscovered." As the message concluded, the hologram faded, leaving the Hartleys in stunned silence. The implications of what they had just learned were staggering. Their contemplation was interrupted by a loud bang. Their pursuers had finally broken through the outer door, and were now in the antechamber. "We can't let them get their hands on this technology," Sarah said urgently. "It's too dangerous." Mark nodded in agreement. "But we can't destroy it either. This knowledge could revolutionize our understanding of history and science." As if in response to their dilemma, a new set of symbols appeared on the console. Emily quickly translated them. It's giving us a choice," she said. "We can either seal this place away again, hiding it from the world, or we can initiate a protocol to slowly release this knowledge to the scientific community over time." The family looked at each other, the weight of the decision heavy on their shoulders. They could hear their pursuers getting closer, the sound of their tools against the inner door growing louder. "We have to decide now," Jack said, his young face serious beyond his years. Sarah took a deep breath, looking at each member of her family. "What do you think?" Mark spoke first. "As a historian, I believe this knowledge belongs to the world. But it needs to be released carefully, not seized by whoever has the most power or money." Emily nodded. "I agree. This technology could solve so many of the world's problems, but in the wrong hands, it could be devastating. It's like in my video games," Jack added. "Sometimes the most powerful artifacts need to be protected until the right hero comes along." Sarah smiled at her family's wisdom. "Then it's decided. We'll initiate the protocol to release the knowledge slowly. The world may not be ready for all of this now, but we can give it the chance to prepare." With a nod from everyone, Sarah pressed the sequence of symbols that Emily had translated. The chamber hummed with energy once more, and they felt a slight tremor beneath their feet. "It's done," Emily said, reading the new symbols that appeared. "The knowledge will be released gradually through archaeological discoveries and scientific breakthroughs over the next few decades. This chamber will be sealed and hidden once we leave." Just then they heard a final loud bang, and the inner door began to crack. "Time to go," Mark said urgently. As if on cue, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a passage that sloped upwards. An escape route, Sarah realized. Cornelius must have known about it. The family quickly gathered what evidence they could: photos on their phones, rubbings of some of the symbols, and a small crystal that had broken off during their interactions with the console. As they hurried up the passage, they could hear shouts of frustration echoing from the chamber behind them. The passage led them to a small sea cave above the waterline. As they emerged into the sunlight, they saw the research vessel in the distance, its crew unaware of the drama that had unfolded beneath the waves. As they signaled for pickup, the Hartleys looked at each other, a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration on their faces. They had uncovered one of the greatest mysteries in human history, faced danger, and made a decision that would shape the future of the world. "What do we do now?" Jack asked as they waited for the boat to reach them. Sarah smiled, putting her arm around her son. "We go home. We've done our part. Now it's up to the world to discover the rest of the mystery, piece by piece." As the rescue boat approached, the Hartley family stood together, forever changed by their adventure but stronger and closer than ever before. They had inherited more than just a map from Cornelius. They had inherited a legacy of discovery, courage, and the wisdom to know when to let the world find its own path to enlightenment. Chapter 7. The Journey Home. As the research vessel made its way back to Crete, the Hartley family found themselves in a precarious position. They had to maintain their cover as amateur historians while avoiding the suspicious glares of the men who had pursued them underwater. The tension on board was palpable, with both sides aware that something extraordinary had transpired beneath the waves, but neither willing to openly acknowledge it. Dr. Elena Mavros, the lead archaeologist, was beside herself with excitement about the structures they had discovered. "This could rewrite everything we know about ancient Mediterranean civilizations," she exclaimed during dinner that evening. "The preservation is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's as if the city was sealed away, protected from the ravages of time and the sea." Sarah exchanged a knowing look with her family. If only Dr. Mavros knew how right she was. As the ship docked in Heraklion, the Hartleys knew they had to act fast. Their pursuers would surely try to corner them once they were back on land. Mark discreetly approached Dr. Mavros as they were disembarking. "Dr. Mavros," he began, his voice low, "I can't explain everything right now, but I need you to listen carefully. The discovery you've made is more important than you can imagine. But there are people who would exploit it for their own gain. You need to be extremely careful about who you trust with your findings." Dr. Mavros looked at him quizzically, but something in Mark's tone made her take his words seriously. "What do you mean? Who are you really?" Mark hesitated, then made a decision. He quickly explained their connection to Cornelius Hartley and gave her a brief overview of what they had discovered, careful to omit any details about the hidden chamber or the advanced technology. Dr. Mavros's eyes widened as she listened. "This is incredible. But why are you telling me this?" "Because we need your help," Sarah interjected, joining the conversation. "And because the world needs to learn about this discovery the right way, through proper scientific channels, not through treasure hunters or those who would keep it secret." After a moment of contemplation, Dr. Mavros nodded. "I understand. What do you need me to do?" With Dr. Mavros's assistance, the Hartleys managed to slip away from the port unnoticed, using a service entrance while their pursuers were distracted by the unloading of the expedition's equipment. They made their way to a small family-owned hotel on the outskirts of Heraklion, where they could lay low and plan their next move. That evening, as they gathered in the girls' room to discuss their situation, there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze, fear gripping them. Had they been found? Sarah cautiously approached the door, peering through the peephole. To her surprise and relief, she saw Dr. Mavros standing in the hallway, alone. She opened the door, ushering the archaeologist inside quickly. "I'm sorry to intrude," Dr. Mavros said, her voice hushed. "But I thought you should know. Those men who were on the expedition with us? They've been asking questions all over the port, showing your pictures. They claim to be from some sort of private research foundation, but something doesn't feel right." The family exchanged worried glances. Their suspicions had been correct. They were being hunted. "Thank you for warning us," Sarah said gratefully. "We need to get back to Athens and then home to the States as soon as possible. But we can't risk commercial travel. They'll be watching the airports and ferry terminals." Dr. Mavros thought for a moment, then smiled. "I might have a solution. My brother owns a small charter plane company. He sometimes flies archaeologists to remote dig sites. I could arrange for him to fly you to Athens tonight, off the books." The Hartleys were overwhelmed with gratitude. Within hours, they found themselves on a small propeller plane, soaring over the dark waters of the Aegean. As the lights of Athens came into view, they allowed themselves to relax slightly for the first time in days. But their relief was short-lived. As they disembarked at a small private airfield outside Athens, they spotted a group of men in dark suits approaching rapidly from a nearby hangar. "Run!" Mark shouted, grabbing their bags. The family sprinted across the tarmac, their hearts pounding. Just as it seemed their pursuers would catch up, a car screeched to a halt beside them, its door flying open. "Get in!" shouted a familiar voice. It was James, their driver from London. Without hesitation, the Hartleys piled into the car, which sped away from the airfield, leaving their frustrated pursuers in the dust. "Mr. Blackwood sent me," James explained as he navigated the dark roads leading into Athens. "He's been monitoring the situation and feared you might need an extraction. There's a private jet waiting at another airfield to take you back to Boston." As they raced through the night, the family held onto each other, the adrenaline of their narrow escape slowly fading. They had survived an incredible adventure, uncovered an ancient mystery, and protected a secret that could change the world. Now they were heading home, but they knew their lives would never be the same. Sarah looked at her family, Mark's determined face, Emily's excited eyes, and Jack's proud grin, and felt a surge of love and pride. They had faced dangers beyond anything they could have imagined, and had emerged stronger and closer than ever. As the lights of Athens faded behind them, Sarah realized that while their adventure with the mysterious map was coming to an end, their journey as a family was far from over. The legacy of Cornelius Hartley and the secrets of Atlantis would be a part of their lives forever, shaping their future in ways they had yet to discover. Chapter 8. A New Beginning. The Hartley family's private jet touched down at Boston Logan International Airport in the early hours of the morning. As they disembarked, the familiar sights and sounds of home felt both comforting and strangely foreign after their whirlwind adventure. Mr. Blackwood had arranged for a secure car to take them directly to their suburban home. As they pulled into their driveway, Sarah couldn't help but marvel at how ordinary their house looked, a stark contrast to the extraordinary experiences they had just lived through. Once inside, the family gathered in the living room, exhausted but too wired to sleep. They sat in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts about the incredible journey they had just completed. Mark was the first to speak. "So what do we do now?" he asked, looking around at his family. "We can't just go back to our normal lives as if nothing happened." Sarah nodded in agreement. "You're right. We've been entrusted with knowledge that could change the world. We have a responsibility to ensure it's used wisely." Emily, who had been quietly contemplating, spoke up. "What about the gradual release protocol we activated in the underwater chamber? How do we make sure it works as intended?" "Good question," Sarah replied. "I think we need to stay informed about any major archaeological discoveries or scientific breakthroughs that might be related to what we found. We might need to guide things from behind the scenes if necessary." Jack, always practical, raised another concern. "What about those men who were chasing us? Do you think they'll come after us here?" The family fell silent, the reality of the danger they had faced sinking in once again. "We'll need to be cautious," Mark said finally. "Mr. Blackwood has promised to help keep us safe, but we should probably make some changes to our routines, just to be on the safe side." As they continued to discuss their situation, a plan began to take shape. They would maintain their normal lives as much as possible, but with some added precautions. Sarah would use her librarian skills to monitor academic publications for any signs of Atlantean discoveries. Mark would leverage his position as a history teacher to subtly influence the next generation's understanding of ancient civilizations. Emily, inspired by their adventure, decided to pursue a degree in archaeology and ancient languages, while Jack became determined to learn more about advanced technologies, with a particular interest in clean energy sources similar to what the Atlanteans had used. Over the next few months, the Hartley family settled into a new routine. On the surface, they appeared to be the same suburban family they had always been. But beneath that ordinary exterior, they were now the guardians of an extraordinary secret. They kept in regular contact with Mr. Blackwood and Dr. Mavrose, sharing information and monitoring any unusual activities in the world of archaeology and historical research. Occasionally, they would receive encrypted messages about new discoveries that aligned with the Atlantean knowledge, and they would work together to ensure these findings were properly understood and not misused. One evening, about a year after their adventure, The family was having dinner when Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. Her eyes widened as she read the headline, "Revolutionary Clean Energy Source Discovered in Remote Greek Island." The family gathered around to read the article, which described a breakthrough in sustainable energy technology that bore a striking resemblance to the Atlantean power source they had learned about. "It's happening," Mark said in awe. "The knowledge is being released, just as we planned." Sarah nodded, a mix of excitement and apprehension in her voice. "This is just the beginning. We need to be ready for what comes next." As they discussed the implications of this new discovery, there was a knock at the door. Sarah answered it to find a courier holding a package. After signing for it, she brought it into the living room and carefully opened it. Inside was a letter from Mr. Blackwood and a small, intricately carved wooden box that looked remarkably similar to the one that had contained Cornelius's map. The letter read, "Dear Hartley family, I hope this message finds you well. The enclosed item was recently discovered among some of Cornelius's effects that had been in storage. I believe he meant for you to have it when the time was right. Given recent developments, I think that time has come. Remember, the greatest adventures are those we share with the ones we love. Yours sincerely, Reginald Blackwood." With trembling hands, Sarah opened the box. Inside was another map, even more cryptic and mysterious than the first, along with a note in Cornelius's handwriting. "To my dear family, if you're reading this, then you've already embarked on the greatest adventure of your lives. But your journey is far from over. The world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and I've left breadcrumbs for you to follow. This map will lead you to the next great discovery, when you're ready to seek it out. Trust in each other, stay curious, and never stop exploring. Your loving uncle, Cornelius." The Hartley family looked at each other, a mixture of excitement and trepidation on their faces. They had thought their adventure was over, but it seemed it was only the beginning. As they huddled around the new map, examining its cryptic symbols and tantalizing clues, they knew that their lives would never be ordinary again. But they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. They had faced danger, uncovered ancient secrets, and protected knowledge that could change the world. Most importantly, they had done it together, growing stronger as a family with each obstacle they overcame. As the sun set outside their suburban home, casting a warm glow through the windows, the Hartleys began to plan their next adventure. The mysterious map had led them to an extraordinary discovery, but it had also led them to discover the strength, courage, and love within their own family. Whatever the future held, they would face it together, as guardians of history and explorers of the unknown. The end.
Subscribe for more.